There's the fear of being alone, and then there's the fear of the unknown. Narcosis preys on both fears. Stranded underneath the ocean after an industrial accident, Narcosis has you attempting your escape to the surface. You will uncover the story of what happened to the rest of your crew as you journey throughout the deep sea facility, exploring new locations and encountering strange creatures as you try to survive. Developer Honor Code wanted Narcosis to be grounded in the sense of reality, turning to non-fiction stories for inspiration. In Narcosis, there are no fictional monsters. Narcosis features what the developers call a phantom narrative. There are two stories in the game you will encounter: the gameplay narrative and the story you hear being told throughout your journey. Honor Code wanted you to examine both narratives to see how the stories overlap or even contradict each other.
Signal received. I repeat, signal received. We're headed back to Compass 1. Repeat, we're coming back. We are coming to get you.
The story is heavily influenced by an assortment of books such as The Divine Comedy and The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, but also films such as Fight Club, Jacob's Ladder, and The Usual Suspects. The story tells from the beginning that the protagonist survives, but the story then becomes not does he survive, but how did he survive? What did it take? What did it do to him? The story motivates you to persevere and experience how it all ends. And for the players who have already played the game, knows that this ends with a bit of a twist. For a consistent world, the team made extensive use of a word Bible which detailed the correct slang and terminology used, the dates and times of key events, and important NPC details. For organizing the story, the team used common tools such as Google Drive and spreadsheets. Spreadsheets were useful for keeping organized when it came to changes to story and voiceover, as well as making the localization process easier. As a result, the team launched the game in 11 different languages. Enhancing the mature story are the game's realistic, lived-in environments. The deep, dark, unexplored ocean was the primary source of inspiration for the environment design. Other sources of inspiration included movies like The Abyss, Sphere, Leviathan, and video games such as BioShock. Environments were not meant to be too stylized or fantastic, but instead were to be grounded in realism. However, this was a problem for the team, as there were few real-world photo references they could examine. A lack of visibility meant that most real-world photos would only show a small area of the seafloor. Since underwater habitats don't exist, they looked at space stations and Antarctic research stations and tried to create something similar that would fit into a marine environment. The rule here was to try and make it look like people really lived there. Concept art and mood boards were used to help the team determine the right atmosphere. Level designers then worked directly in the game editor to block out scenes using basic geometric shapes. Post-process and environmental lighting were tweaked during production to help the atmosphere come together. Normally, the ocean is portrayed as bright and colorful. However, Narcosis is set in the abyss, the deepest part of the ocean. That meant the team had to distinguish their ocean environment by making the ocean in Narcosis dark, hostile, and alien. One of the challenges was designing an environment that felt organic, while also making the path forward clear to the player. The team did a lot of playtesting and tweaking to ensure that players would not get lost or lose their way.
You all right? Let's get back to the hab.
As you explore more of the game's environments, it quickly becomes clear that you are not alone.
Anybody read? Maybe we're on the south side. Hab's falling apart.
The inhabitants of Narcosis are all real-life creatures, such as spider crabs, octopuses, and anglerfish. They were chosen based on how iconic they were to the setting, how interesting they looked, and if they had the potential to interact with you on your journey. For the ocean's more dangerous inhabitants, they exaggerated certain features such as the scale. They had to create believable horror creatures based on real fauna. The desire for realistic creatures ultimately determined what creatures made it in the game. For example, one idea was for you to have a recurring encounter with a colossal creature. Another idea was for you to deal with aggressive leech-like worms which would attack your faceplate and obscure your vision. However, once their vision of realism became clear, they scrapped any ideas that didn't adhere to it. The concept art was done in Photoshop. Then high-poly sculpts were made using ZBrush. 3ds Max was used for the final mesh, rigging, and animation. Texturing was done with both Photoshop and Substance Painter. Once it was decided what creatures would be in the game, the team did animation tests. Creating swimming animations that looked real instead of robotic was a challenge they could only overcome with the help of their programmers, allowing them to create creatures that would swim naturally. Balancing realism with the unknown can be difficult, but for Honor Code, this allowed them to develop Narcosis into a realistic underwater horror. The environments might doubt your sanity, the creatures might make you feel less alone, and the story will enlighten you through the dark, deep sea.